Hi, that was quick.
That was quick. I either my internet's improved or I'm, just getting better at this. I mean, there's a couple of it's probably the former, let's be honest.
Well, this is what our fifth, sixth time, you know? So we're getting better.
Yeah, exactly. We are getting better, no doubt. Welcome. Thank you again for coming on. I doubt that anybody's watching this right now via YouTube. Probably most people, if anybody is watching it so far, I have to go in and to navigate to another screen to find that out, which I'll be doing here shortly. But thank you so much for showing up. I'd like to introduce my biweekly conversation partner, Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Thanks as always for coming. And for anybody who's new to the stream, what we start with is, again, I've got to go make sure that I can monitor the conversation. So this is an interactive kind of ask me anything format. This week, the topic is going to be a controversial one, insofar as my LinkedIn post from a week ago indicates. So we're going to be talking about how recruiters reach out to prospective candidates. And there's lots of strong opinions, it would seem, on this topic. So first thing we do every week, or I should say every other week when we do these meetings, is we start with just kind of a fun activity, I guess, if you will. So Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you to read our card for this week. And I'm going to go navigate to where I can see people's comments. Give me just a second. I'm going to put myself on mute per usual.
All right. Sounds good. So yes, like Scotty was mentioning, we do start kind of like with an icebreaker type of question. I got a whole new deck of cards because we have gone through a couple of them. And I use that same deck of cards with my team too. So I feel like the questions were a little bit getting to the point of being repetitive. So I have selected another card from the new deck. And it says, what is one food you don't like that you wish you did? So I don't even think I want to like the food that I don't like. So my answer is very unpopular and I get crap for it all the time. It's bacon. I do not like bacon, do not like the smell of it, the texture. I just can't handle it. And people judge me, which they can. I get it. I'm not perfect. That's my one flaw. But I don't think it's something that I would even want to like, though, honestly. And for the people that are going to ask me, hey, do you not eat pork? I love me some carnita tacos. Like carnitas all the way. But bacon, just not my thing. So that is my answer.
Well, so to your point, what a funny question.
It was a good one.
Because like you say, like, why do we want to like a thing we don't like, right? That being said, as a lover of bacon, we've talked about this before so many times in the past. Like, I just can't even fathom how you couldn't just absolutely love bacon. So I think that's a great
More
answer.
bacon for you. More bacon for you. That's what I always tell people. Since I'm not eating my bacon, you can have it. Take it all.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You, and to your other point, that obviously is your one and only flaw. So.
Thank you, Scotty. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Well, again, I just want to, so now that I'm monitoring the feed, I just want to thank everybody who's watching this live. Again, just so you know, this is an Ask Me Anything format, meaning any questions that you have about our topic today, feel free to just type them into the comments section. Kelly is the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. So that means Kelly is a quote unquote internal or corporate recruiter, whereas I am a third-party recruiter. KēSTA I.T, the company that I work for, we're essentially headhunters, I guess, for lack of a better term. I know that's not the best term; it's the old school one. But so we're going to come to this topic from two different places, though. Kelly did get her start in third-party recruiting with me back in the day at Tech Systems. And again, the topic is how recruiters reach out to prospective candidates. So this is how recruiters reach out from kind of a cold start. So basically, just to set the groundwork or the a little bit of context here, we're getting lots of comments about bacon so far, Kelly.
I told you, I know. I was kind of debating that, like, if I share it or do I not? But
The only thing more polarizing than my post a week ago today is your comment about bacon.
you know what? It's fine. It's fine. Come on, bring it.
Yeah, it's okay. You know, everybody, I just want to remind everybody that's making comments here that oh yeah, and I didn't ever answer that question. Somebody
You didn't. Yes. So I'll read it
right.
again. What is
Well,
one food you don't like that you wish you did?
Yeah. So here's the challenge, and it's been a challenge for me in a number of ways, but there's not a lot of foods I don't like. In fact, I can't even really, I'll give you one: jackfruit or durian. It's like,
Yeah, explain.
it's a fruit that I think is native to Vietnam, I want to say, and it's not look or smell, especially smell like a fruit at all. It smells absolutely terrible, but there's ways to cook it that make it apparently better. And I've yet to encounter any kind of jackfruit that that I like, but it's apparently very healthy and it's kind of trendy. And so, even though I look like a guy who'd probably eat jackfruit, I don't. So that's something I maybe would like. I don't know, like. Anyway, moving back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, so like I was mentioning, this topic comes from a post I put up about a week ago. And it is, I've learned, very polarizing. That is, how should a recruiter reach out to a prospective candidate? And I was kind of using this via LinkedIn, right? So I put forward a very exaggerated and, obviously with text and especially with social media text, there's only so much nuance that anybody can read into a thing. But I put out kind of an exchange between a recruiter and a prospective candidate. So first thing I want to mention here is, in my post, I'd mentioned, I'd led with a line that was like, are you open to comparing your current role to one that I'm recruiting for? I didn't add any context to that, despite the fact that when I reach out to people, there will always be more context than that, right? That being said, I think the spirit of the thing is still kind of, it doesn't change much in terms of, this post was accompanied with a poll, and the poll was like, do you want people to, are you open to having a proactive conversation? Do you want recruiters to send you a job description and a comp range? Because that's often the response I get back when it's cold outreach. And then the other two options on the poll was never contact me, or which got 1% of the votes, and then other, and please make a comment. So this post, Kelly, as you know, I'm not like the most popular guy on LinkedIn by any means. I'm nowhere near an influencer, but this post got nearly 200,000 views, about 200 comments. Majority of comments were people who felt strongly that I was, basically terrible recruiter. That's how I read them. And it just begs the question for you and I to have a little bit more nuanced conversation about this topic. How should recruiters reach out to prospective candidates? So once again, as always, if you're watching this, thank you first and foremost. Feel free to like and or share this. That way we can get more people involved in the conversation. But I'd love to know if you have any questions about how recruiters should reach out to a prospective candidate. Again, this is cold outreach. You weren't referred, you didn't apply. This is me taking a look at your background on LinkedIn. Oftentimes it's job titles and very little by way of like context. That's just how people write their resume or their LinkedIn profile. Or Kelly, us reaching out to that person and saying, hey, we have a job we'd like to talk about with you. So I guess the first thing I want to discuss, Kelly, is 60% of the people polled said send a job description and a comp range with your initial outreach. What are your thoughts on that? I don't want to get you in trouble, but
Yeah.
what?
Oh, go ahead.
Please, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, this is definitely my opinion, so I'm speaking from experience, not only currently but previously as well. And to your point, Scotty, this is a very, I wouldn't say controversial, but just a hot topic because there's so many opinions, there's so many preferences. I don't think there's a right or wrong. Well, actually, there is a wrong because again, it's my opinion. But in regards to your poll asking about to see a job description and compensation, me personally, I don't include a job description and I do not include compensation. For me, sending out that first outreach, I want to make sure that, hey, do they want to talk to me? I want to be personable. Yes, I'm going to reference something on their profile that was maybe specific and a match that I did see, but I will reference the type of role as well. And if I do include a job description, again, I'm not going to include like the whole thing or a PDF, but potentially like a link to our careers page. However, I will say sometimes that link gets like formatted and finicky when you send it over. So that's why that's why I don't do it.
And to be clear, one point I want to make to anybody watching us today is you're representing one company. You're the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. So when you reach out, people know you're referring to a position with DigiCert, right? But you're still not including a job description and compensation range. And to your point, it sounds like if I'm characterizing it correctly, it's you want to make sure you have a conversation with somebody and maybe figure out what's the best fit of the positions that you currently have available. Talk to them a little bit, give them some context, et cetera, et cetera. Is that fair to say? Do I have that right?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're interested, like that's definitely what I would like is a conversation, a small chat. I'm not asking for an hour of your time, but yeah, I think you get more out of a dialogue versus email communication back and forth because so much is lost in that translation. And again, just the person interaction, you're able to get a lot more information out of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Or call, not in person. You know what I mean?
Totally. So I think to your point, this is exactly what I was going for with regard to my post is just trying to get to know somebody, taking 20 minutes of their time to understand what are the top 3 most important criteria to you in the next job you take. How do you characterize not just your experience, but also your interests with regard to positions? And, getting to know a person a little bit. So because I get to know the companies that I represent and, trying to also kind of glean what might be a good match from a company culture standpoint. For anybody who just joined over the last few minutes, Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert, and I are talking about proactive outreach to prospective candidates. We got a good question, Kelly, I want to address before we get back to the topic at hand. And it's obviously a related question. It's probably more relevant to what I'm doing today, but I'm going to pose it to both of us here. So we got a question. Do you find your role as a salesperson to employers or a service to the unemployed? So again, I want to make sure everybody knows that you're the leader of the talent acquisition group for a particular company, DigiCert. And so, I don't know how relevant you feel like that question is. Do you want to give your thoughts on that? And then I'll certainly speak to how I view that.
Yeah. Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. Do you find your role as a salesperson to employers or a service to the unemployed?
Gosh, it's a little of both, really, because you're consulting with, and I guess, again, my perspective is more from internally, but I feel like it's relatable even from a third agency because you're trying to understand what's the need, what's the hiring manager looking for. And so, yeah, you're going out trying to find people and you're telling them the benefits of coming for a certain company, either if it's internal, like come work with us and this is the why, or in your scenario, Scotty, you're a third party working with many companies, but you need to understand what makes them great and align that with the person that's looking for a position.
Yeah.
But then the service piece, absolutely. I can't tell you how many friends have reached out to me, or I've even reached out to them asking them, hey, I know you're in a tough spot. How can I help you? If it's with building your resume, your portfolio, updating your profile, just anything. So that's when when thinking about that question, that's where my mind goes. So it's a little bit of both.
I love it. And I think it's totally fair. I mean, I think that might not be the most satisfying answer, but the reality is I agree with you. And here's the thing, I'll put it, I'm going to frame it two different ways. So with regard to that question, in terms of how I make money as a third party recruiter, and I should be clear, as a third party technical recruiter, I absolutely think of my role as a, salesperson. I'd prefer to call it consultant, but salesperson is let's just be real here, is applicable as well. I mean, I have to think of it as a salesperson to employers. For the way I get compensated, or my company gets compensated, is by the companies where we place people. So, that in terms of my role, from what is my day job? How do I get paid? That is what it is, right? It's to be a consultant to companies and help them find talent, right? With regard to, it's an interesting, the way the question was positioned is interesting in terms of my role. With regard to my role, in life, I'm always trying to add as much value as I possibly can. And that goes the same in business. I think adding as much value as you possibly can is the right way to do business. And so by virtue of that, I absolutely view my role as a service to the unemployed. The reality with regard to that question is, for better or worse, there's often a perception if someone is not working right now, that they're, and they're actively on the market. That's not somebody that our clients necessarily want to see from us. They're like, hey, that person's probably going to apply to my job, right? And go through my internal team, go through your team, Kelly. Right. And, sometimes that's not true. I mean, I've gotten great people that are not currently working, placed in positions that they weren't aware of a position, and I made them aware of it, or, the company certainly wasn't aware of them, et cetera. But yeah, I guess in short, that's kind of how I answer that question. I want to help people. I'm happy to, and sometimes to my detriment, to review resumes, give feedback, make introductions to people in my network from a networking standpoint, to help someone who's unemployed that I know I'm not going to be able to place. So to your point, just to bring it full circle, I do view it as both as well. But I have to say that in terms of how I'm going to get paid, for better or for worse, it's more as a consultant / salesperson to companies than it is as a service to the unemployed. So would never ever expect somebody who's unemployed and trying to find a job to pay me for anything that I'm going to help them with. So, all right, another question we got here. How do you feel about so many companies requiring a college degree for roles that don't actually need it? And I think that last part might be slightly subjective, but what are your thoughts on that, Kelly?
Oh, so my personal opinion, we need to change it because honestly, there are some roles, and I know many individuals who did not go to college for a specific marketing, IT, finance, and they went straight to the job, got build their experience that way, and honestly are good or better in that role. So my personal opinion, I think that the companies that offer it, they're just going to have a tough time finding someone specifically with that requirement, because there's a lot of talent out there that you can easily find and you're missing out on them.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. I mean, my personal bias is it's so funny when I was coming out of school, and I think it's probably the same for most people coming out of school. And when I say school, I mean college. I I did go to college, and in many ways feel fortunate that I was able to do that. But it was hard to get my first job. It's funny how many companies want some level of experience, and there's a lot of people on LinkedIn better equipped than me to talk about, as a new grad, how best to get your first job and how to talk about your experience through school, or other part-time jobs you may have held throughout your high school and or college career, and how to translate that into relevant experience for a particular job. But typically it's pretty hard to find your first job coming out of school anyway. And so, to your point, Kelly, I think it's an arbitrary, my opinion, arbitrary requirement. Anybody who has, 5 years, or frankly, even, just a couple of years of experience in a job is going to know a heck of a lot more than somebody who has a college degree that's related to that job, barring the obvious, exceptions, doctors and lawyers, et cetera. So that's my thought on it. And yeah, I agree with you there. Real quick, just want to get back to the topic at hand. Again, thank you so much for the questions that we've gotten thus far, and feel free to continue to ask questions in the comments. We've got about 10 more minutes to discuss our topic overall today, which is proactive outreach to prospective candidates, and particularly here on LinkedIn. So Kelly, you'd mentioned earlier the reasons why you don't tend to lead with a job description and a compensation range. I had mentioned, for anybody who is just joining, that this post I put out last week had a poll. 60% of the people polled said they want a job description and a salary in the cold outreach they get from recruiters. So here's what I want to make, just something that maybe people haven't thought about. I just want to make sure that I say this, and perhaps this feels like I'm defending my bias. So at some point today, I'd like to, take the devil's advocate route and kind of maybe to look at the other side of the argument. But here's something that I know as a recruiter that I don't think a lot of people know if you haven't been a recruiter. That is that a job description, even the best written job description written by the hiring manager who's gone through a process to identify a business need and understand how the job is going to solve for that business need. Even those job descriptions, which I think we can agree are the rarer ones, there's still times where a hiring manager might meet a candidate who doesn't fit the job description, but adds value in a way that the hiring manager alone could understand, right? So they bring a different skill set, a different, piece of experience, whatever it might be, that is not at all in the job description. Oftentimes the job description is, completely misaligned to what the actual need is, because maybe somebody dusted it off from HR and put it out there without reviewing it as much, right? Having the conversation, I've seen over the course of my career, can create opportunity. Now, you could argue as a recruiter, you're a third party. You don't necessarily know what the hiring manager knows. I'll grant you that sometimes that's the case, but I'll also say that both you and I, Kelly, I think can paint a picture of what are the projects being worked on, what's the team like, what are the people like, things you can't find in a job description. And compensation range, that one especially, if you're the person who a hiring manager meets and decides is great for something that might not be the actual job description, so often they'll work to get you more than what their range originally was. So in other words, my bias is that if you're wanting to see a job description and a compensation range and then make a decision based on that, you're missing out on a tremendous opportunity to explore what might be there. Now, for people with high end demand skill sets, I recognize that you're probably going to be talking to recruiters all day, every day if you accept every cold outreach. But that's my, argument against sending a job description and a compensation range without having a conversation. Any thoughts on that, Kelly?
Yeah. And going back again, when thinking about comp, I was thinking it from the other direction. And yeah, if that's like your selling point for the company is that you have very good comp ranges, throw it out there. Absolutely. Attract them, But again, that's just one piece of it. And I guess what I'm saying too, if they come back to me like, hey, I want the job description, the comp, I'm not going to try do this little dance with them back and forth. Like, I'll give it to you. I'm just not starting my conversation. That's just not my style to lay it out as my first contact to them.
100%. I agree with that. That to your point, and that's where the nuance comes into this, right? Mm-hmm. Is I reach out to somebody, they request a job description and compensation. I'll say, hey, let's get on a call and talk about it. They'll say, I'm not interested in a call with you. Send me the job description and the compensation. And I, to your point, I'm going to send something, right? I'm probably not going to send a PDF. And, the worst part about a compensation range, if you do think there's flexibility on the company's part, is you don't ever want to have somebody feel like you're selling them a bill of goods if you throw out a range that actually ends up not being possible. So there's just a bunch of challenges, but anyway, that's kind of, I think, in terms of just explaining in a little bit more nuanced way why, I feel the way I feel about trying to get onto a phone call and have a conversation with somebody, understand what they're looking for, and then help match what I have to what they're looking for. We got another
I feel like we can talk about this topic for hours, and we're just getting to the surface of it.
No doubt, right? And maybe that's maybe that's something we can think about in the future. Because like I said, this obviously was, in terms of things that I put on LinkedIn, this absolutely was one of the most, this was the most controversial, engaged with, hated on topic that I've ever put out there. And it kind of, surprised me a little bit. A comment real quick. I just want to make sure I read it first. So we had a great comment. We had thank you to Kelly for being here as a comment. And then
well, thank you to whoever that is.
I actually happen to know that this guy's a great guy. And then we had you all know this, but I think others might need to know that compensation is more than just pay. Which, 100%.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. It's the whole package. Again, like I mentioned, like we're just scratching the surface of this, and there is a lot more, I would say, technique to becoming to being a recruiter. There's just not like, this is the one thing that you need to do. No, it's a finesse. There's a thing to us.
Despite what the prevailing wisdom might be about recruiters, there's
it's
more than meets the eye, right?
Well, headhunter, think about it. Like, that word just makes me cringe, and that's an old school word. It's different. It's definitely changed.
Indeed. No, I agree. I think, to your point, there's so much more we could talk about. I guess the one thing that I'd like to wrap up with is just to try to take the feedback from 60% of, I had over 4,000 people vote in this poll. So it's not a tiny sample size. So taking the feedback from those people, that 60% of them said, send me the job description and the pay. Now, they may not have read the post and kind of realized that I was talking about the very initial kind of outreach, but I would say just to maybe try and take away and look at like devil's advocate of our argument as to why that might make sense. What I'll say is, again, letting somebody know what, at a high level, the industry at very least. In my business, it's really tough to share who the company is right off the top, but the industry, the type of role, the benefits that they might be able to see aside from compensation, those are all things that I try to also include in an outreach. And if somebody just asks, like you said, Kelly, I think at some point you just send them something, right? You just send them something. And if they're like, I need an on-target earning of $250,000 a year, and I know for a fact that my position, which I think pays well, pays, a target earning of like 170,000, just talking about cash, not talking about benefits, but, probably not worth, jumping on a phone call if you're not interested in hearing about other positions, it begs the question for me is, and I'd love to have the hypothetical person, maybe you can play that role here, tell me, like, why not just tell me what the job description should be and what the compensation is, rather than saying, send me that first. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, I'm not doing a good job playing devil's advocate at all. I'm just still trying to confirm my own bias here. Do you see merit to the argument that we should be sending job descriptions and compensation up front? And if so, how could we do that? Given 60% of those polled on this particular post feel like that's what they want.
Right. Well, why don't we follow it up with another poll? It's like, hey, let's open this up to discussion. What would that look like to you? Because again, that's a big chunk. 60% want to see the job description and compensation. So is it just the link? Is it a PDF? Or is it like highlighted the top 3 attributes of this job description? Like, how detailed do you want? Because me personally, when I get emails, like, short and sweet and concise, beautiful. But if you're going to tell me your benefits, the pay and all of this, and it's like, I have to scroll. No, like you lost me. I'm sorry. But again, there's other individuals that love it. So I would be curious to understand, like, what exactly are those specific details that you're looking for when you say job description? Is it just the link, or is it the actual, like, cut and paste? Here you go, read it, then let me know if you're a fit, and then come back to me.
I got a great comment here from a recruiter. So talk about confirmation bias, but sending a job description up front is like telling your realtor that you want a house.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
It's a great analogy. And yeah, I think, again, we're probably not going to overcome our bias here. And I think, if anything, I'm hopeful that we've at least helped, a couple of people that maybe were on the other side of the argument, at least see some of the nuance to what we're talking about and our rationale as to why we don't lead with that. Now, all that being said, like I mentioned, for somebody who has a very high in demand skill set, you obviously can't take 15 minutes every time a recruiter reaches out to have a conversation and hope that that person's going to be good enough at their job to keep you in mind for a future position that you would like. So, at the end of the day, probably the best comment I got on that post was one that said, you can't really, there's no shortcuts, there's no hacks as a recruiter. It's about grinding it out, building relationships, getting referrals. And over time, I'm going to continue to be an advocate for those who do feel like it's worthwhile to take that upfront phone call. But I have to prove that too, and that takes time. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up. And obviously we didn't solve all the world's problems today, but
next time we will.
Exactly. That's it. As always, Kelly, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining me. For those of you who joined today, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the comments and the questions. And just know that we do this every other week, every other Wednesday at 11:30-ish Mountain Time. And that's our current cadence as of right now. Perhaps we'll add more to that in the future. But, if there's anything in the meantime in terms of topics you want to see us cover, questions that you want answered and just didn't want to necessarily put them out there on a live, anything at all, feel free to let us know. You can, comment on this post. You can reach out to us directly. And again, Kelly, you're just getting all sorts of compliments. So you'll have to go through the feed after and
compliments or comments about my bacon.
Yeah. Well, to your point, that's actually a really good point. Compliments on the latter half of our discussion today. Yeah. Bacon is more polarizing, turns out, than recruiter outreach, cold outreach.
You got to keep it entertaining.
That's it. Indeed. All right. Well, hey, thank you again for joining. And thanks to, again, everybody who's watching. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Cool. See ya.